We are here and ready to go. So Ambassador Privatelli, I'll hand the mic over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, James. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to see so many of you ready to launch with us a conversation about the new IMAS 711 on land release. We will get inputs from a very distinguished panel, but then I would also like to have as much interaction with all of you as possible. Let me briefly introduce the panel, starting here on my left, with my dear colleague Armen Harotunyan, who is the head of the Department for Research, Innovation, Standards and Operations at the GICHD, and one of the authors of the new IMAS. Then we have Mr. Fadi Al-Saleh, the director of the Mine Action Center of Syria, the new National Mine Action Sector. Welcome to Geneva. In the middle, we have James Cowan, the CEO of the Halo Trust. Welcome, James. We have then our dear friend, Angela De Santis, the deputy head of operations at the Fondation Suisse de Déminage here in Geneva. Victoria Grant, program manager officer at IMAS. Welcome. And here we have, on the left, Mr. Rabi Al-Shawashi. He is a program manager, founder of Free Fields in Libya, representing a national operator. Thank you so much. Amazing. Let's go into the middle of the course. It is important to know that this IMAS 711 is probably one of the most prominent and most relevant for operations on the ground. It has been reviewed by the board, it has been adopted, and it's, as you all know, core business of mine action. How do we define, manage, close hazardous areas? So this is, so to say, edition 2 of the land release IMAS, and it's not just an update of language. We, together with many partners, introduced some new ideas. And we tried to codify the experience of decades with land release and also open the door for new technology such as drones and remote sensing in that normative framework. 3 questions will be discussed today. First, what changed? What does it mean for the field? And what does it mean for national programs and systems and funding streams? Let me ask the first question to Armen, who is, as I said, an author of the IMAS. Could you please give us a conceptual overview of the IMAS and explain what is new as simply as possible? Thank you, Armen.
Thank you, Ambassador. Good morning, everyone. I want to make sure that the thanks goes to all members of the technical working group of the IMAS Review Board, all 14 of them. Angela is here with me. Some of you are in the room. Thank you so much. It's been a very fast-paced and very effective IMAS Review Board technical working group meeting to make this new IMAS come true. So many of you know IMAS on land release have been initially adopted in 2006. Many changes were done since then, and about a year ago, we've submitted a proposal to the IMAS Review Board to see if IMAS still stands as it is, or how many changes we need to bring into the new IMAS to make it more closer to realities, to changing context, emerging technologies. And there used to be 2 IMAS chapters, 710 on management of land release and residual risk, and 711 land release. So this was a task of the technical working group. The technical working group, after first few meetings, decided that the 2 IMASs need to be merged, so to say, into one, because there was lots of repetition or parts of it that were not necessary. Many parts of it were already reflected in new IMAS series that were adopted, and that suggestion went back to IMAS Review Board, who've decided to go ahead with our proposal to revise the IMAS completely and come up with a new second edition of IMAS, which is a major revision since 2008, so 20 years later. There's lots of changes, so I only have 5 minutes left. But if I have to summarize, lots of definitions we as the mine action sector are using have not been codified in IMAS. Things like direct, indirect evidence that became common language, things like EOD spot tasks, and lots of discussions around whether EOD spot tasks are part of land release or not part of land release, talk about residual contamination. All of that we've tried to codify in new IMAS with definitions. So that, to me, will be one of the main changes in it, where anything that needs to be defined has been defined, I think. One of the other major changes is that we've introduced the notion of intrusive and non-intrusive interventions in the definitions of technical and non-technical survey. And this was partly responding to the sector's needs, feedback we've been receiving over the past few years on trying to promote a better use of emerging technologies. What is now in IMAS as intrusive used to be called technical in previous iterations or in common language, and that was causing a bit of a debate on what is technical and what is not. For example, a drone, a remote sensing technology, is this a technical intervention or not? So after a few days of discussions collectively, we've decided to introduce the word intrusive, non-intrusive into various definitions, and also explicitly prescribed that intrusive interventions could also include remote sensing equipment if properly trialed, if it shows that remote sensing equipment that is emerging quite fast can actually serve the purpose of technical survey, which is to identify confirmed hazardous areas, to identify direct evidence in confirmed hazardous areas, and give some additional information on type of the hazard, pattern, and so on and so forth. So that will be the two main changes I'd like to highlight. We also simplified the language quite a lot. The two IMSs became a much leaner, much shorter document. We've looked at how it translates to many other languages that it will be translated for use in developing national mine action standards. So simplification of the language to make it easier understood, easier to translate was another shift, I would say. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Armin. I remember the distinction between intrusive and non-intrusive is a new element, and important that we have clarity on these definitions. In any case, if you have questions on the new IMAS, please don't hesitate to reach out to the panel, to the technical working group, also after this conversation. Thank you. It's very important now to get the perspective of a national mine action center, of a national actor, and we invited our dear colleague Fadi from Syria because of the complexity of the situation there, the level of contamination, of course, also the numbers of victims which we unfortunately see there. Fadi, my question to you is, what does this new land release approach mean for you, and how is this shift towards an evidence-based decision-making structure, how is it implemented in Syria, and what does it mean for tasking? Fadi, please, he will speak in Arabic, so you can use headphones if you don't speak Arabic, please.
Thank you. صباح الخير.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come from Syria to Geneva. When we talk about the implementation of land clearance standards in a context like Syria, we should start with an important truth. We don't work in a stable or clear environment. We work in one of the most complex environments, whether it's due to diversity, contamination, and the pace of changes. The National Center of Pine Action is very new. It has been established 6 months ago, approximately. There is a very small team working in this center. This means that we are building the national system while trying to understand the scope of the problem on the ground. In this context, land decontamination standards are an important tool for us, not only as a technical benchmark, but as a decision-making framework. However, the main challenge that we are facing is achieving the balance between two things. The National Mine Action Center is working on accelerating the removal operations. On another hand, the standard confirms clearly that clearance should uh, precede decontamination and that decisions should be based on evidence. Managing this balance is one of the most important operational challenges that we are facing in Syria currently. What we are currently doing is embedding the idea that clearing lands doesn't necessarily mean urgent or immediate decontamination. It starts by understanding the dangers or threats through a technical and non-technical clearance. We started with limited field operations in order to learn and assess the situation, not necessarily to implement the work. We are currently working on building a national information management system in collaboration with GICHD and IMAS, and we are starting to prepare for the establishment of this room. The information system is being developed in cooperation with the GICHD. We are working on also the technical aspect of it in collaboration with UNMAS. This system will be essential to make sure that the decisions of land clearance in Syria are based on clear data, not on assumptions. It is important to note that implementing the standard in a context like Syria requires a lot of flexibility. The reality on the field is not a straight line. We might start with the clearance work, and then we might have to go back to that same spot. However, or we might go back to some areas that were classified before and reassess them. This requires not only understanding the standard, but the ability to make it adaptive and flexible without, of course, violating its essence or core. We don't pretend that we made a lot of progress, but we are working on setting the correct pillars because we can't afford any mistakes at this point. Finally, I would like to confirm that the implementation of the land decontamination standard in Syria does not only rely on national capacities, but on the continuous partnership with international bodies and the adoption of an evidence-based approach, even with the pressure we are under to finish the work because we are making sure the results are sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, brilliant. Thank you, very important to get that perspective and we understand how much data and information management are important for this work. Coming now to James, for you, for Halo Trust, the largest global operator, this change of IMAS is not just a theoretical intellectual exercise, it has real operational consequences. So my question to you would be, first of all, what would be a solid, a good implementation of the land release standard on the ground? And the second element would be, how can we ensure that this focus or the default option of doing clearance is not dominating too much and would lead to a situation where other aspects of mine action are underfunded, undersupported? James, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Tobias. And I think there's a simple one-word answer to your two questions, and it's probably technology. And the reason why I say that is, whilst we all know the sector has made remarkable progress over the last 4 decades, the uncomfortable truth is that at current pace, far too many countries are going to miss their treaty deadlines, and some by decades. Behind each year lost is a community trapped by the legacy of conflict. So we really have to accelerate decisively because it's a credibility issue. Our donors want value for money. They expect value for money, and affected states expect timely progress. And most importantly, the communities we serve expect and deserve safety and dignity. I don't think any of those expectations are unreasonable. So we have a responsibility to ensure that we can achieve the greatest possible outcomes with increasingly limited resources. That requires a combination of both sound processes and new technology. I think that the updated land release IMAS is an important way of improving our processes, but it must be matched by an investment in new technology to make every stage of the land release process faster and more efficient. In less than 18 months, our workforce in Halo has dropped from about 11,500 people to 7,500 today. Now that might seem depressing news, but actually if we embrace technology at the rate we want to, I don't think it has to be a depressing fact. These challenges that we're facing should not prevent us from making the investments we need to apply new standards, retrain our staff, and introduce new technology. As we are trying to modernize our part of the sector, we should expect a smaller and more productive, higher skilled workforce trained to use a new generation of survey tools, detectors, and semi-autonomous machines. The great danger in our work is not only danger from explosive hazards, it's also the danger of waste. Waste of time, waste of money, waste of effort, and above all, waste of opportunity. Every day, a community waits for land to be released. The cost is measured in livelihoods delayed and futures constrained. The new technology helps us shorten that wait without compromising safety. I think the new edition of the IMAS is helpful in clarifying the role of drones and remote sensing in the survey process. Ukraine has been leading the way, as we all know, in using drones and applying machine learning in cutting down the time needed to analyze imagery. But this technology can only make a difference on the ground if it's matched by national standards that allow operators to make evidence decisions based on the results. We also need to ensure that there is investment in making that technical survey and clearance processes cheaper too. It's not just a case of process change or applying off-the-shelf technology. Fundamental advances in detection technology are required to cut false positive rates while preserving safety. Many of the techniques identified in research labs over the last few decades are now on the cusp of introduction to the field because of advances in related industries. But we now need a concerted effort among donors, operators, and national authorities to prove these tools and scale them up for wider use. One example is magnetic resonance detection, a technology that finds explosives rather than metal and promises radically to reduce the amount of time deminers spend excavating scrap metal. After a second phase of trials in Angola this year, the technology should be ready for adoption in 2027. But we need to ensure that donors, national authorities and operators are all aligned as each has their own role to play in getting these technologies into the hands of deminers. Innovation is only meaningful if it moves from pilots and prototypes into everyday operations. So we must be rigorous in selecting which projects to fund and pursue. That is the purpose of our recently inaugurated Halo Technology Accelerator Fund, to ensure that promising technologies scale rapidly from testing to global deployment, reaching thousands of deminers working in dozens of countries. National authorities must ensure that national standards take full advantage of the technology and allow operators to use technology to make evidence-based land release decisions. The land release IMAS is at its heart a permission structure, permission to act on evidence, permission to cancel land that the evidence says does not need clearing, permission to defend those decisions, permission to release. By insisting on evidence over fear, by enabling flexible and proportionate responses, by giving national authorities and operators the tools to make and defend decisions with confidence, we don't eliminate uncertainty, but we give us a principled and defensible way to act through it. We've all experienced a database map that doesn't quite match the ground, the hazardous area that gets recorded and sits untouched for a decade because no one can quite prove it is or is not contaminated. We make decisions about land on the basis of imperfect information, incomplete histories, the word of a community elder who remembers something his father told him 40 years ago. We operate in countries where the records were never kept or were destroyed or were never honest to begin with. The standard does not ask us to achieve certainty. It asks us to apply all reasonable effort to document our reasoning transparently, to build a credible, well-documented, evidence-based case for every decision we take. We must all take action now to apply this standard to our work and invest in the technology required to do it efficiently. The contamination problem is not getting smaller. The funding environment is not getting easier. The communities waiting for their land back are not getting more patient. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you so much, James. That's fascinating. I liked, in particular, that notion of permission framework or permission structure. I think that's a very interesting approach. Thank you so much. We invited a second operator, a global operator based in Switzerland, Fondation Suisse de Déminage. Angela DeSantis, if I'm not mistaken, you were part of the drafting team. Thank you for your support and for your inputs. I would like to speak with you about the non-linear implementation of land release. Everything looks very structured on the paper, but in reality, you often have to take decisions on non-linear implementation, going back to survey after partial clearance and so on. Do you think the second edition of these IMAS will help you to take such decisions in the field?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to go more into the technical details of what we do as operators. From an operator perspective, land release has never been a linear process. This has also been highlighted by the director of the Syrian Mine Action Center here. In the field, we don't go neatly from non-technical survey to technical survey, and then clearance, and then release. What we do instead is we move back and forth. We revisit the assumption, we adapt to the new evidence. And this has always been the spirit of land release. So this is not the exception. This is the reality of the operations. However, in many contexts, we face obstacles in applying this approach fully, whether due to rigid tasking, reporting expectation, or the need to justify decision within a framework that implicitly assumes a linear progression. So with the new version of IMAS 711, what the IMAS does is to align the framework to this operational reality. It formally recognized the land release is a continuous, non-linear, evidence-based process. In doing so, it facilitates its practical implementation in the field. One of the most important shifts that also we get a lot of discussion during the working group on that specific point is to move away from defining results by activities and toward define them by compliance with criteria and evidence. What in practice, this means that land is no longer reduced or cancelled simply because we do NTS or TS, but instead is released because evidence meets nationally defined criteria, regardless the activity that has produced these evidences. This is a fundamental shift. it placed the focus where it should be, on the strength, quality, and triangulation of evidences, not on the sequence of activities. And for an operator like FSD or like all the operators in the sector, this is critical. Across our operations, whether in a complex, contaminated environment or rapid evolving context, we are constantly required to make decisions based on evolving and sometimes incomplete information. So the non-linearity is what allowed us to be adaptive, to be responsive, ultimately more efficient in the use of resources. At FSD, we see that on a daily basis, our team are frequently adapting and revising assumptions, adjusting the task boundaries, shifting between survey and clearance. But these decisions are not the deviation from the plan, they are the plan. But making them more credible and acceptable, they must be justified. So this is the critical point, how we justify this news process. So, especially because the non-linearity is difficult to justify when there is a framework at the national authority level or donors where they are expecting a clear linear process and sequence of activities. So with the new IMAS, we have an answer to that. So the IMAS introduced a structured, transparent, and traceable evidence framework. It emphasizes confidence in information, reliability of sources, and triangulation. It links all decisions to clearly define national criteria, and doing a lot of emphasis on national criteria, and accept the concept of all reasonable effort. So this allowed us to do a fundamental shift of conversation. So from why did you go back to survey when you were doing already clearance, to here is the evidence, this is the confidence in this evidence, and this is how it meets the criteria. And this is not only a technical improvement, it's also a shift on communicating and justify and defend operational decisions. So in order to make it work in practice, as operator, we need to adapt to this new framework. At FSD, we see three main areas we need to adapt where this evolution can be reflected. So first of all, on the SOPs, they must explicitly allow for these flexibilities from switching between methods within the same task, with ensuring that all the decision-making is properly documented and traceable. Second one is reporting. We need to move beyond activities-based metrics. Reporting should not only capture what has been done, but why land has been released, and on what evidence and level of confidence. And finally, quality management. Quality control can no longer focus only on physical outputs. It must increasingly assess the robustness of evidence, the consistency of the analysis, and the logic behind the decision we make. So this is a significant shift, but it's also an opportunity to improve efficiency, to better target resources, to be more effective in different operational scenarios, and to strengthen accountability. And ultimately also allow us to deliver what matters most, which is safe land for the community. In closing, land release has always been about managing uncertainty, and this is also a point that has been made. So the new IMAS does not remove the uncertainty, but give us a clearer, more structured, more transparent way to manage it. It recognizes the operation are non-linear, the decision must be evidence-based, and the outcome must be justified by criteria. These elements will be further developed in the forthcoming technical note. I'm marking that as a note from the working group, which will provide practical guidance how to support the implementation, real implementation in the field. And for the operator, this is not just a technical shift, it's a shift in mindset. As FSD, together with the wider operator community, we fully embrace this shift, as it will make our work more efficient, more credible, and more impactful for the community we serve. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Angela, crystal clear. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to see how concise and clear the panel is. So everybody's playing according to the rules. Very good. Victoria Grant, you're from IMAS. IMAS has a key role to play. You are one of the authors. And without revealing a secret, you can say that IMAS and GISDG have been parents of these IMAS from the very beginning. So Victoria, two elements maybe to discuss. First of all, you often have to hand over responsibilities to national actors, right? Do you think the new edition of the land release IMAS will help you in a smooth transition to this national responsibility. And then the second question would be the coordination. What potentially new forms of coordination does the evidence-based land release approach require in the very complex peacekeeping operation context that you're working? Please.
Thank you, Ambassador. First question is yes, but I will expand. Before I do also want to thank Armin for his immense patience in chairing the technical working group. He has also been bold enough to take on, maybe not voluntarily, but willingly nonetheless, the chair of the technical working group for the TNMA. And the reason I mention this is because it is exceptionally difficult to navigate a lot of operational opinions in one room, and he has successfully done exactly that. But for good reason, because you may all have heard, I don't know how many times already, evidence-based and technology and well, we say linear. Anyway, I'll get to the point. This IMAS second edition is based on almost a decade of lessons learned, as has been stated. But, land release has always been about efficiency. And almost 10 years after the first edition, the second edition is intended to enhance that, improved efficiency. But that efficiency will not see the ground unless we see it into implementation. So we can all sit in a room and have spirited conversations about what needs to change from lessons learned and some of the list of what James put forward that is somewhat triggering when we talk about repeated polygons on a database and not being able to release because we have to stick in a linear fashion, whatever it might be. But that implementation comes under a lot of unmasked responsibilities across a wide breadth of activities. And I'll touch on a few of them. We deploy with partners that are very much in the room, specifically UN Ops and UNDP. HALO is also an implementing partner, many in the room. But we will deploy to missions in peacekeeping, special political, to enable a mandate, to deliver a mandate. That cannot be enabled without land release. And these improvements in the second edition enable us to more efficiently release land, to give freedom of movement to our peacekeepers on the ground, and to protect civilians. The other quite significant way that we are responsible for the implementation of this IMAS and delivery and ensuring it is effective on the ground is our responsibility often as an acting NMAA. We often take on that responsibility in absence of an established one, or we support a growing one. And that specifically, especially around en masse, is where I believe we come up against potentially a challenge. Excuse me, I just want to take some water. My time's ticking, I apologize. And that was meant to be a cliffhanger either. So that is the challenge. In order to deliver these specific lessons learned from IMAS, and we've talked about a few of them today, if they are not translated appropriately to the en masse and therefore contextually applied to the countries that we work in, we risk not just not improving the efficiency, but actually restricting. And we have been very, very specific in the technical working group to ensure that whatever restrictions we make to ensure that the same mistakes aren't made, we are not restricting the advances in technology that are so important, as James pointed out, and more future methodologies to improve those efficiencies. And if that cannot be translated to IMAS in a contextual, evidence-based, pragmatic way, then we will have failed the increase in efficiency. And that is where IMAS's breadth of responsibility and unique perspective comes into play. And I just want to touch on, Ambassador, yesterday you asked the question, are we acting in a way that meets the scale of the problem? And I think many of you will have already heard about the AI advances in terms of grit in Ukraine. We talk about necessarily in contexts like Ukraine or Syria, where the scale is so immense and the resources are coming in, we cannot approach it with the previous linear process that was reported before. We need a risk management mindset in that context. But we cannot do that without applying these specific details of IMAS disseminated into a contextual, pragmatic, and evidence-based way. And if anyone has a tally of how many times we say evidence-based today, it will be pretty high, no doubt. So, in conclusion, I promise, in conclusion, with IMAS's unique perspective, we hold an immense responsibility across the breadth of the land release life cycle, but we hold it alongside our partners in pretty much every element of that land release process. But the difference between benefiting from that increased efficiency and risking restricting operations is the translation to IMAS and the application to context in country.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you for highlighting that link to the IMAS standards in the different countries. Very important. Thank you so much. Our next panelist will be Rabi Al-Chawashi from Libya. Thank you so much. My question to you would be, this new IMAS is opening doors for new technology. Do you think, thanks to these new technologies, such as remote sensing, we're creating a level playing field for smaller local operators? The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Rabi Al-Jawashi. I came from Libya. I'm the program manager of Free Fields Foundation and one of the founders. First of all, I would like to thank Geneva Center for this opportunity to be here on the floor with you guys and explain in our way how the technology works with a small operator like us. First of all, as well, I would like to thank our authorities, which is presented by LibMac over here to support us in this field and push us in the mine action activities, and of course our donors. As a small national organization, my days can be busy. It's a full-time job just to make sure our teams are working in the field. So we don't have a lot of time to consider a new technology or innovation, or the minor changes required to the national standards or our SOPs to incorporate them into our existing methodology. In contexts where the funding for mine action in Libya over the last 5 years has dropped up by 75%. I also don't have resources to dedicate, and I don't have a back office or HQ somewhere. This is why the work of GICHD, the IMAS Review Board, and other global colleagues crucial for us. If I can give one example, we bought our first drones back in 2016. By 2017, we had staff that could pilot them, and we were testing in the field. we could see what was possible, what was not, and how they could be a beneficial tool. Where we forced barriers was in standardizing their use. Do we need a separate accreditation for a drone operator, or it would be a part of the accreditation of the survey team? What are the minimum requirements for training? What does all reasonable efforts mean when we are talking about the drone imaging? Can we cancel hazardous area after surveying it only with a drone, or should it always be paired with other data collection methods? It's just another tool in the toolbox, or it can be a standalone activity. If this difference, depending on the type of the camera or sensor or AI software used during the analysis, is this different in urban or rural environments? Of course, to answer these questions, I need to go back to our Mine Action Center, but they also have limited time and resources. Plus, they are concerned with these things called liability. So when there's nothing in IMAS or clear examples from other countries about how exactly new technology has been introduced and implemented, they will always be hesitate, especially when there is no clear need to bottleneck that the new technology is addressing. For instance, new law order techniques were quickly adopted and formalized into SOPs, because without serviceable explosives, we could not operate. So the IMAS, and more importantly, the active management and updating of the IMAS and incorporations of lessons learned and the new developments from around the world quite literally creates the foundations for us to build our house on. At the same time, we still have a lot of issues we would like to see addressed in IMAS going forward. As my colleague from Syria discussed, the challenges of urban clearance is one of the most important for us. During the height of COVID in 2020, we were forced with the rapid withdrawal of the forces from Tripoli alongside mass return of 200,000 IDPs to a heavily contaminated area. And all the international NGOs were not present because of the travel bans, and we only had 3 accredited teams, clearance teams on the ground. However, with us were many teams from the army and the police as well. At that time, we had many voices, especially international actors, arguing that according to the land release process, we should pause clearance and focus all resources on surveying the city first. Of course, the systematic survey of the city was needed, but given to the scale of the emergency and the number of the casualties happening daily and our inability to stop people from returning, our positions what that is about. The priority of a human life, so as many resources as possible need to go towards clearance. To be honest, we were also concerned with access and know that the army and police, who were already suspicious of NGOs, would never forgive us if we were not on the ground with them during the emergency. Until now, we are not sure what the ideal approach would be and would like to see the dealt urban clearance in emergencies dealt with IMAS. Everyone has been focused on funding, especially over the last year and a half. I think we have demonstrated that national actors can do more on the ground and at a fraction of the cost. However, the international community can mobilize more rapidly and has resources it can dedicate to enhancing standards and methodologies, to testing, establishing new procedures and requirements. My hope is that both sides can accept their strengths and weaknesses and use it to partner together to create more effective, efficient, and impactful mine action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabi. That was really inspiring, and thanks for raising these very concrete questions, what it means for the affected countries. We have now time for questions from the floor. I would encourage you to raise your hands and use your microphones. We'll collect a few questions, and please introduce yourself, and you can also tell us to which specific panelist your question is addressed. I see a hand over there. Please introduce yourself.
Hi there, Helen Gray. Thanks very much for the presentation. Perhaps this is for Armin. I know that historically, operators have quite often been prevented from doing the right thing because of very rigid funding or rigid contracting models. And I just wanted to know with the new update, how you thought this would affect contracting practically, if it's going to improve, the way that we can work a bit more flexibly.
Thank you so much. We will take one or two more questions and then get back to the panel. Any urgent questions? I see there. Please introduce yourself. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Sufyan Al-Sous from IOCTR. First of all, I also like to thank all the panelists for their great information it gives to us. Just I want to go back maybe 10 years ago. For IMAS, we did a very big job for translation from English to Arabic. So there is so many points in IMAS was translated. This is the point one. Point two, we did also have with GICHD, they did a great job for us. We have 2 or 3 times workshop in Lebanon, in Beirut, which also we thank them again. That we just, I don't know how to say it, we just make the translation, in Arabic I will say it,
to standardize the concept and definitions in translation.
Some words in Arabic, you say it in Egypt is too much different in Jordan or in Yemen or these things. If we go back for these informations, it will help a lot. And if anybody, I still have, which I translate, I still have it, so anybody need it, especially in Syria, we are pleased to give this information for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very important question. Let's take a third question and then go back to the panel. Our colleague up there, please. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Chair. Glenn Darian, on behalf of HI. The IMAS land release framework has given us a clear, evidence-based model. The question now is what the standard says, but how confidently we apply it in practice. For instance, from HI's perspective, if NTS is weak, everything that follows is inefficient. If it is strong, land release becomes faster, more targeted, and far more cost-effective. Confidence in all reasonable efforts is where standards meet real-world decisions, and without clear national interpretation, operators tend to default to caution, and that often means over-clearance. To conclude, the shift we need now is simple. We move from implementing standards to trusting the decisions these standards allow us to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Very clearly formulated. Thank you so much. I would like to give the first question regarding contracting to Armin, please.
Thanks. Thanks for the question, Helen. Contracting shouldn't be based on IMAS, should be based on national standards adapted to national context. So this is where the point was made across the panel that we need those IMAS to be converted to national standards, adapted, contextualized. This is why we kept IMAS at a higher level and have highlighted repeatedly the nonlinearity, the national criteria, the nationally led evidence-based process, and so on and so forth. But you're right, the IMAS, and we in JSHD hear it so much that we at JSHD, those who write IMAS, which is not right, by the way, there is an IMAS review board with 30+ members, are writing IMAS that are too strict, too rigid for operators to implement. Our response for that usually is let's review it. This IMAS has seen as something that we cannot touch, update, revise. We've looked at it and we've discovered that there's so many things we need to improve. So NMAS is what should follow. Contracting to me should be based on national man action standards. And also maybe one critical part also links to the statement questioned by Humanity and Inclusion. Very good point. And we are, the same technical working group has decided to develop a technical note on mine action that is heavily focused on criteria and evidence. And we're hoping this will give further guidance to national mine action authorities to translate that to national standards, national SOPs that are less rigid. But rigidity, we would try to remove rigidity as much as possible by including things like you can cancel land at any stage of the process and not just in the beginning. Your own criteria should be developed at national standard level. You can use any equipment you want in an intrusive process as long as the end result is you meet the criteria for which you use the equipment for. So if it's a technical survey for which you're looking to confirm hazardous area based on direct evidence, use whatever it is, as long as you meet the criteria. And more is coming on that in the TNMIA, hopefully in a couple of months' time.
Thank you very much, thank you. The second question was about translation into Arabic, also the rollout of the IMAS, in particular in the Middle East. I would like to maybe ask Victoria, how do you see the rollout of these IMAS as a member of the technical group?
Well, amongst the many discussions that were had during this technical working group, we did try to consider the translation, the language that we were using, considering, as Armin referenced, intrusive went round however many days or weeks. But I think this can't be done without Arabic-speaking representatives from countries in order to, and operators that can clarify and ensure that this is the case. And I spoke a lot about the necessity to apply this appropriately and in context, and what we understand to be the level of detail in NMAS, as you rightly point out, is not the only necessity. And we do, as I understand, and I'm mindful of kind of saying we as quite a broad bucket across as operators or as acting NMA and NMAA, check and ensure that this is reflected. But it may be that we need to ensure that there are specific frameworks for doing that and specific accreditation for that operational check in a specific language, because we could not do that as a panel, and yet we are the ones defining it from an IMAS level.
Thank you so much, thank you. I'd like to hear the position of James on an interesting statement made by our distinguished colleague from AHI. So he said, if I'm correct, that if the NTS is weak, the other parts of mine action fall apart, and a good IMAS is in a way not just a rigid step-by-step program, but an insurance that we take the right decisions. What would you say to these assumptions?
Yeah, I think it wasn't really a question, it was a statement. It was a statement with which I fully agree. You know, what is an IMAS? It's a piece of paper at the end of the day, and you've got to turn that intent written down on a piece of paper into actual action. And so the NTS, the speed of action is really what I'm trying to encourage here. You know, as someone who has come to mine action the last 10 years, I witness a painfully slow sector. And our donors, our beneficiaries want to see a much faster process, and the trigger for that is going to be technology. So I simply need this to be thought of not as a piece of paper, but as a system that unites the IMAS with the technology and the human intent to go at this at all sensible speed.
Thank you very much. Speed, efficiency, technology, all of course closely interconnected. We have time for a few more questions. Can we give the floor to any other colleagues? WFP, please. Yes.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all the panelists. This is extremely interesting. It is highly relevant, and perhaps this release of this new version of the land release IMAS could be an opportunity as well that we have to embrace, being bold, you know, and doing something that we perhaps haven't done up to now in the development of the sector. And that is, I mean, one of the terms I didn't hear that much was risk management, but of course it's all linked to how we manage risk. And I think we are at this juncture. Most of us know that humanitarian mine action, in many instances, just simply can't keep pace with recovery needs. Are we too slow? Are we too safe? Are we too expensive? Do we need to look at mine action and release criteria in a new way to help speed up convention requirements, obligations, but also to enable this recovery element to be better linked? So at the moment, they don't connect in many contexts, and I'm talking from my own experience in Ukraine in particular. As we've heard on the discussions, it's all key, as it is, in the IMAS and how it's interpreted. And if you take 1,000 pages of IMAS and strip them all back, as we've heard, it's to do with all reasonable effort and criteria for land release as defined by the national authorities. Now, I don't think, from WFP's perspective, that we believe that the clearance en masse, you know, should be diluted. It must be pure, it must be confident, it must be sound, and where people are at risk, where land release occurs close to communities, that quality must be maintained. But I think it's in the technical survey, IMAS, where we need to be bold. And this will allow us to embrace the new technologies, as James mentions, but it means that perhaps, particularly in low-risk contexts, we can have a lighter approach to asset application. And we move forward knowing that we're taking this, this decision. And there's policy moments to review on that. There's certainly points if there's accidents, but we need to balance speed against risk better. And I think, as I said, this technical survey, IMAS, allows us to do that. And this is a great opportunity and juncture that we should embrace now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me take a second question here from the floor. Any comments, question at this point? I don't see any hand up there. Okay, let's get back to the panel. Oh yeah, please. A colleague from Libya, please, yes.
السلام عليكم صباح الخير. العميد مهندس عادل العطوي مدير العمليات بالمركز الليبي للأعمال المتعلقة بالإلغام مخلفات الحرب. نشكر جهود مركز جنيف على تطويرهم للمعايير والشغل اللي يشتغلوا حاليا في بعض الفصول من المعايير الدولية.
We would like to thank you for your work as a national authority.
Thank you. Just we now have translation. Yeah, the English translation started. Yes, please continue.
As a national authority from the Libyan Mine Action Center, when international standards are set, like IMAS, we are required to develop our national standards, and this is only natural for all programs. However, when we talk about including technology and including AI, as a national authority, we have some reservations in some issues because the condition is whether the land is liberated or not liberated in front of the international community and the national authority. So as people who, or as an authority who are in charge of their people, it is difficult for us to include this technology. Already in our national authority, we are flexible enough to amend our SOPs. So with the difference of companies or technologies, how do we guarantee outputs with all the different manufacturing companies, the accuracy of data, and the different technologies? So I don't know if this specific point was taken into account in the standard. The question is addressed to Mr. Armin.
Thank you so much. Let me give the floor first to Armin on this question, and maybe also on the first question we heard on risk management.
Thanks, Tobias. I'll answer the first one, and I'll pass the second one to the other members of the technical working group. On the first one, Guy, fully agree. It's about risk management. It's about better decision making and all reasonable effort. We've tried to build that in there as much as we could. And also interesting piece of information for the colleagues here. This year, the IMAS review board work plan includes revising the technical survey, non-technical survey, risk management. It's actually in a plan from last year, but we didn't want to touch it until we finished the land release and the land release TNMA, tackled that, and then got deeper into technical survey, non-technical survey, risk management. Using these opportunities, I'd like to also call upon the sector to volunteer to be part of this IMAS review board technical working group meetings. Many of you are on IMAS review board. We're not getting as many volunteers from various parts of the world as we would like to, especially country representatives, especially from WFP, especially from national election authorities. We need you on the review boards to bring your operational perspective back to us, so that whatever we produce actually is done based on the field realities. If you would like to, I don't know if I'm violating any IMAS protocol, Sasha, but if you'd like to be part of NTS, TS, risk management, I hope it's not too late to put your name against any of those. We'll be happy to have as many as possible. As many as we can. Thank you. And on the second question, Angela?
Thank you. So talking about how to include technology, how to be confident in the evidence we are collecting information. So we are spending a lot of discussion in the working group, especially for the technical note that will be released with this IMAS on when the information we collect qualify to be evidence. So this is the confidence, how we verify this information, how confident we are. So despite the way we have collected this information, that could be based on technology or based on the field work or interviewing informants in the field, we need to be sure that the piece of information we are managing is the truth. It's reflecting the context and is informative for the process. So I think a way to include technologies in the process is to be sure that whatever the source of information is, we are verifying the confidence we have in this information. So it's good enough in order to inform the decision or not. That's the point that we can use to allow more technology in the sector.
Excellent, thank you so much. For a final reflection, I would like to hear Fadi, our dear colleague from Syria. It has been highlighted that, of course, technology depends on the context and a standard cannot solve everything. Fadi, do you share, understand the concerns, the reservations expressed by our distinguished colleagues from Libya, from your experience, with regard to technology?
Thank you very much. I agree with what Calvin said. Calvin, right? Armin. I'm sorry. We consider that IMAS standards as traffic lights that were set in a country in turmoil. Later on, at a later stage, when the national authority is established, then it adjusts these standards according to their context. So yes, I agree with him. These standards are like a traffic policeman in a road that's in turmoil. As for the technology, I don't know if I understood the question raised by our Libyan colleagues, but regarding the quality assurance of land clearance, did you talk about modern technology and how can we? I am asking how can we include these technologies in national standards and the SOPs of operators on the ground, because here we carry a responsibility. How much can we rely on technology and how can we know for sure that the data collected by technology are accurate? Yes, in my opinion, that's my opinion. In my opinion, technology gives you better accuracy and better credibility because when it is used in land clearance, it gives you data that you can store regardless of manual technical clearance. Now you have credible data that you can add in your report. I assume that technology is better than manual work or more accurate. So maybe you can store the data to corroborate what you found. You can confirm that the land is decontaminated using these technologies. We use this technology in Syria, and the results were great. Of course, they need to be adjusted based on the nature of the soil, the land in Syria, but honestly, the results were outstanding.
Thank you so much. That's fascinating. It's exactly the kind of dialogue we would like to see at the end between responsible people in different countries. Thank you so much. Let us finish by giving a warm round of applause to our panelists. Thank you.